Get started?
Yes.
All right, folks. It is 6 o'clock on May the 4th, and I'll be calling to order our first meeting of the evening for public safety. And the present, I'm sorry, it's hard when you're not sitting at the table with everybody. Present, we have myself, committee member Mr. Dale Black, and Mayor Merritt, who will be sitting in for our vacant position, as well as our city administrator, Mr. Batten, our police chief, Brian Turner, interim chief, fire chief, Brian McCone, Judge Martin. I think I saw you signed in. Yes, there's Judge Martin. So everyone is present. The next item on the agenda would be public comment. Mr. Madden, are you handling that tonight? Do you see?
Yes, we do have a couple members of the public. Marsha, Ingrid, and Mr. But none of them have indicated they would like to speak. Okay.
We'll have another opportunity at the end of the meeting for public comment, as most of you are probably aware. The next item will be reading and approval of the minutes of March the 2nd. I'll have a motion on the minutes for March 2nd.
So moved.
I believe that's a motion to approve by Mr. Black. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mayor Merritt. Any discussion, corrections, etc.? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes for March the 2nd, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Black, you in?
I did. Yeah.
Motion carries 3-0. Minutes approved. Next item we have will be reports and communication from our department heads. We'll let Judge Martin go first if she's okay with that. Do you have anything to report tonight, Judge Martin?
Yes, ma'am. In reference to our budget, right now we are supposed to be at 19%, and we are currently at 34%. With the way that we're trending right now, I fully expect us to come in at the end of the fiscal year under budget. I hope you heard me okay.
Yes, I did. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. And that's all that I have to report.
Okay, does anyone of committee have any questions for Judge Martin at this time? See a nod no. All right, then we'll move on. And Chief Turner, I'll let you have your report at this time, please, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Currently, we are running at 28%. Our scheduled amount right now would be at 19%, so we're about 9% under budget at the current time. I do expect a couple of things to come through as we close out the year, but we're tracking well at this time.
Okay, any questions for Chief Turner? I have one question, not related to the budget, but are we, or is staff, planning accordingly for National Night Out? I know that's not till August. I was just thinking about that coming in with all the events that we have scheduled for the summer, and that's one of our big ones. So is that something that you're just doing as much as you can and planning as if it's going to happen, Chief Turner?
Yes, ma'am. Currently, what we try to do with that is we really gear up the plans and preparation generally about June. We already have the music for the event booked. You know, last year we had the farmers market going on at the same time, so we used that music from the Tuesday nights But this year we've got our music's already lined up. As far as our events, that's hosted by our police department. And the fire departments assist us with that, and public works as well. But that'll kind of gear up a little bit more as we get into June and the first part of July. That event's scheduled for the second Tuesday in the month of August, to mark, going back to school and the community partnership. So I feel we'll be ready when that time comes. And we'll plan accordingly as we move through the next couple months to see what direction we have to go in.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I know that's a big event that a lot of our residents look forward to, including myself. So thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. If there's no further questions, Chief McComb.
Yes, ma'am. We're at 21% over. Our ideal remaining is 16%, so we're 5% under budget at this moment in time.
Perfect. And again, questions for Chief McComb? Okay, seeing none, I would just like to comment that as I am still becoming acclimated to public safety, and COVID-19 is not helping me personally get acclimated. However, I did like to see the detailed report that came out in Mr. Madden's administrative report from Friday, showing some training numbers that I'm not accustomed to seeing in that format. So thank you for that, both Mr. Madden and Chief McCone on that. It was good information and something that when the residents ask what we're doing and training, it's right there at our fingertips. So again, thanks for that information.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on. We have no unfinished business, and the only item under new business is item 6A, which is authorization to proceed on disposal of surplus equipment that you can find in your package under pages 5 and 6. This is similar to what we did a couple of months ago in Public Works. The amount of the surplus equipment exceeds $15,000. Therefore, per policy, it requires approval of council. At this time, you can see on page 6 the list of the items. So if committee has any particular questions to address, I'm sure Chief McComb or Mr. Madden can answer those questions pertaining to that equipment. So I'll open it up for y'all to ask any questions you may have.
I have none.
You have nothing, Mayor?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I'm having to flip back and forth because I can't see everybody on my screen. So that's why it's taking me a second to make sure y'all are good. Mr. Black, you good?
I just want to ask Brian on that American La France. Is that the one we've had in storage for, I think, several years?
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's one that's stationed out at Station 47 on Woodruff Road. It's been out of service for over 10 years now.
I thought we got rid of that thing. I don't know why.
No, sir, because they talked about one discussion prior to was talking about making it a parade / funeral truck, but nothing's been done to that since. So,
Is it still got the equipment on, or has it been stripped?
it's been stripped. Yes, sir.
Is it to any service, to any volunteer fire department, anything that we might can help out with, or?
We can put it out there and see if that's what y'all want to do. That's fine with me.
I mean, they can bid on the auction, but I just wondered if there's some way legally we could help them if they didn't need it and it's still a usable truck. It might help them out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it might help them out. I mean, just a thought. I don't know what committee thinks.
It's probably, like I said, they've had to do a pump test and all that on it because it ain't been pump tested in over 10 years.
Yeah, I thought we'd already gotten rid of this. What, 84 model?
Yes, sir. It's 84 model.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, that's just a thought. If somebody in a volunteer unit around could use it or whatever, So.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Ms. King.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir. All right, if there's no further questions on the equipment, what's the pleasure of committee in regards to proceeding with the disposal of the equipment?
We go send it to full council as an item to go forward with and let the fire department dispose of this surplus equipment that we have for the bid process and all.
Thank you, Mr. Black. We have a motion to forward to council the authorization to proceed to dispose with the surplus equipment. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mayor Merritt. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of forwarding the authorization of disposal of surplus equipment to council, say aye.
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 Motion carries 3-0. That carries us back to the last public comment. Mr. Madden, I'm going to let you.
Can I, Holly Abercrombie, ask a question?
I guess, Holly.
I noticed in the agenda item on the sale of the equipment, it says it can be listed within 60 days on GovDeals. I just want to make sure that we can push it definitely to July 1st, because this is not a part of the budget amendment that's showing tonight. That's just my only comment.
Mr. Madden, I'll let you weigh in on that, but the timing of it, we should be okay, don't you think? If we take it to council on the 18th, will we be good with that, Mr. Madden?
Yes, so we have some flexibility there. Right now, and to Holly's point, she pointed out too, we're discussing bringing this item to committee. Right now, with the way COVID-19 has impacted fire departments throughout the state, and businesses in general, the number of bids we probably would get if we went immediately to GovDeals would be low. So we wanted to put 60 days in there so that if we went into the beginning of the fiscal year, July 1st, more folks might have an opportunity to bid on it. So we're good on Holly's point.
Perfect. Any other public comment?
Ms. King, this is Taft Matney.
Hello, Mr. Matney.
Hello. Just a couple of quick comments. Number one, to Chief McCone, please pass along to your folks how great it is to see driver training in full effect. I've seen them through the neighborhoods. I think you've got some new folks that are getting to know the streets, and it's great to see them out and about in the engines. It's also great from a community relations standpoint. So thank you for that. Chief Turner, just wanted to give you a quick nod for your folks. We have a lot of students at our local schools who are obviously going stir crazy, and I've noticed several of your officers going to check on these young people, making sure that they're okay, both physically and mentally, and just letting them know that we're still there and that we care about them. So to both of our public safety divisions, thank you, and thank your folks for everything that they've done.
Thank you, Mr. Matney. And I'll also,
Thank you, sir.
I failed to thank Chief Turner as well. I am seeing in our neighborhood police presence in the early mornings, afternoons, and evenings, and that's very much appreciated. As we have, as we always brag about our low crime, that our officers are out in our neighborhoods patrolling and making sure that everyone is safe and nothing suspicious is going on, especially with so many people at home right now. So that has been very noticeable, and I appreciate that, Chief. All right, any other public comments?
Chairperson King, no one has indicated they would like to speak, but I'm going to unmute all of the members of the public should someone want to provide comments. I don't see any indication that anybody wants to speak.
All right, very good. No other comments by council?
Just one, Ms. King. Let me think it'll stop. Home phone is ringing. It was interfering. Just Mr. Madden, if you'd be sure that Cindy gets the transcripts correctly. When Mr. Matney was speaking, I lost all audio from him. I had no idea what he said when he got to Chief Turner. So be sure and see a transcript of that, please.
Absolutely, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. King.
Yes, sir. Mr. Matney, would you like to repeat what you said to Chief Turner so the mayor can hear that statement?
Sure, Ms. King. Mayor, I was just thanking Chief Turner and asking him to thank his people, because as we have our young folks who are not currently in school physically, a lot of his officers, or some of his officers, been going to check on these students and make sure that they're doing well, both physically and mentally. And just wanted to thank him for making sure that our students know that we still are watching out for them and still care about them. It's a tough time for these kids.
Thank you, Mr. Matney, for summarizing that again. Mr. Mayor, it's shaking his head, so I get that you got that pretty much. Excellent. Okay, no other public comment. We'll move on to committee concerns. One head shake no. I see two heads shake no. So that gets us to the end of the agenda in an orderly manner. So what do I hear on adjournment?
So moved.
To adjourn.
Second.
By Mr. Black. We stand adjourned. Thank you all so much. Hope to see you in person soon. All right, who's up next?
Taffy and Michael ready?
Whenever you are, Mr. Black.
I'm ready, Mr. Black.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Recreation Committee meeting to order for Monday, May the 4th of 2020. It's approximately 6:17 p.m. Those committee members that are present by video are Mr. Taft Matney, Mr. Michael Reynolds, myself, Dale, our interim recreation director, and Mr. Brandon Madden, our city administrator. I'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting, and hope everyone had a good weekend. And be like I'm Miss King, I'll be glad when we see everybody face to face. Then Michael can do away with the 8-foot table he wanted me to sit at. First item is a public comment. Do we have anybody wish to speak, Mr. Madden?
Chairman Black, nobody has indicated, but I'll give folks a few minutes should they want to either wave via WebEx or speak up.
Yeah, if nobody wants to at this time, we'll have another opportunity toward the end of this meeting for them to speak up and have a comment. So,
Okay.
Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is reading and approval of the minutes of the April the 6th, 2020 meeting. What do I hear on these minutes as they were distributed to committee?
Move for approval as presented.
I have a motion, Mr. Madney, to approve. Do I have a second?
Second, Reynolds.
Second, Mr. Reynolds, any additions or corrections to the minutes? I had one. It might not be important under the second item in there. It says public comment none. And it says Chairman Merritt. Mayor Merritt in there.
Yes, sir. We'll have that corrected.
That's the only thing that I saw. And it just up above it says Chairman Black. Then you get in public comment, it says Chairman Merritt. So should have been Mayor, I thought, so. That's the only thing I had. Anyone have any other additions, corrections to the minutes with that one change right there, just changing Chairman Merritt to Mayor Merritt?
No, Mr. Chairman.
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All in favor of the minutes? Aye.
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 I would say aye, so it's a 3-0. They all approved unanimous. Okay, we'll move on to the next item is report communications from city officers. I think Bart is on here. Bart, you want to jump in there at this time? Appreciate all the work that you and your staff are doing on this shutdown time.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Black. Can you hear me okay?
Sure.
you've seen in your weekly report, we've got some of the fencing down at the city park. Public Works is working on that project. It's going to be probably coming back up this week. They're going to pressure wash it and stain it as well. The playground equipment at City Park is complete. They've still got the asphalt out. That's been passed by council, and it's going to be, excuse me, it's going to be, I've got Patty Ackes, I've already called them, and so they've got them on the schedule, hopefully about the third week in May, when they're going to start that paving project around the walking trail and the playground area. The basketball court at Springfield is being sealed as we speak. They were out there working today, and they're going to paint it probably by the end of the week. We have a little bit of a problem there. The pollen is falling on it. So we're trying to make sure that the pollen doesn't stick to the paint. So we're waiting for the trees to stop shedding on that. And the Springfield playground equipment has been ordered. We ordered it. Brandon and I signed off on it last week, so it's been ordered. And I got a date, the third week in May. It might be delivered, but we might delay that because we got to do some drainage issues down there, and so that's what we're working on as well. As far as Public Works is doing that for us as well. So our budget's maintaining pretty good. We were a little over at the senior building because I think we had to buy an air unit a couple months ago. That repair maintenance is a little high over there, but other than that, we're sitting steady. That's all I have, Mr. Black.
Thank you, Bart. Any questions to ask for Michael for interim recreation director, Mr. Cumlander?
No, Mr. Chairman.
One quick question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Reynolds.
Mr. Cumlander, I assume your staff is working diligently as we work through this, to figure out how baseball seasons will resume and how that'll affect our seasons. Could you update committee members on that?
Yes, we have a meeting Friday with the other rec departments in the area, which will be Greer, Simpsonville, and Fountain Inn. They'll be right now. I think Greer is almost about ready to cancel. So I've been in communication with Brandon, and we're gonna try our best to get the season in, even if we have to play it the month of June. So we're just going to take precautions for the youth and the parents. We were discussing that, what we want to do on that. But we are working together with other cities and see and collaborate with them to see what we can do as far as moving forward. And yes, we do want to play baseball. If that answers your question, Mr. Rose.
I think that was the biggest thing I wanted to encourage, is as we have the kids that Mr. Matney had talked about being locked up for so long, baseball would be an excellent outlet for those guys, and certainly trying to salvage any season that the city would be, I think, good for the kids and good for the parents and good for the parks.
I agree. I have two that are driving me and my wife crazy, so I understand completely. So
one of them's a left-hander too. We want to get the left-handers on the baseball field.
That's right. But yeah, we're working on coming up with a game plan. I think we got one and talking to Brandon about it, and so we're going to meet again and just figure out the best way to do it.
Yeah, I think, and that's all I would encourage, is just making sure that we're not waiting for the governor's orders, and just start preparing now for what potentially those seasons could look like, via a June 15th starting date. How do we get that schedule and get whatever? And I'm making up numbers, but just making sure that if we get the clearance and if the fields are ready, that it's not us holding it up. So, and I know your staff is working diligently to that, and just like to encourage and tell you we appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Cumlander.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Anything else? Bart, I'd like to thank you too. And for those that have not had the opportunity, I rode by today at City Park. The barricade was down, so I drove in and looked at the playground equipment. It looks great. I mean, they've got the fencing up, the ground down, all the equipment in. And I think, like Bart said, the only thing left to do is paving around it, but it looks great. And Chris Walker and some other public works employees up there working on the fence behind Joel Ann's open market. They had it torn down and they were in the process of cutting some trees and all back and doing that. And there is some equipment, material, not equipment, material left from that playground. And we looked at it, and I think, Mr. Matt, you want to look at it. If we've paid for this project, we need to save that, and we might be able to take that and use it over on a project at the Pine Forest, Oak Forest playground that we've talked about, maybe redoing that, taking the mulch out and redoing it at some point. So if this is still ours, then we ought to make sure we store it. And Mr. Walker said that he was going to make sure that we got it and put it in Public Works today. So that would save us some money on that project if council decides to do it. So, but I think it was some of that padding and some turf and all that that goes on the ground at the playground. So that would save us some money by doing that. So.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's going to stay. And I talked to Mike Whedon, also Public Works. That sand is left over, and that sand that you saw, Mr. Black, every 2 to 3 years, you put that on that surface. That's just they require you doing that. So we already got that first batch. So in the next couple of years, we've got that sand there to do that project at City, and that rubber and all that's going to be stored. So yes, I've been talking to Public Works. They did a little bit better job on order. We did the City Center project, so it wasn't as much left over.
No, it wasn't a great deal, but whatever we can save money on from, if we decide to do it at the Pine Forest, make everything uniform, it'd save us that much money on that one. So I appreciate what you're doing and Public Works and all working on that. Thank you. Anything, Mr. Mann, you have anything to do while we're in the reports? Mr. Mann.
Black, I do not at this time have any comments.
Okay, thank you. All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is unfinished business, and I see none is on the agenda. So moving on from that, the next item is the new business, and the item is the Sports Center access door upgrade, and I think you should have it on pages 6 through 8. And what brought this up, and I think it's in the notation, I was asked by some of the Sports Center members and some of the staff about a possibility of maybe fixing it to where the full paid members would have access to all the equipment, could use the exercise equipment, the weight equipment, the walking trail, and all facilities at the Sports Center, because they're noticing a lot of the people, just walkers that are going up and walking and coming down and using the exercise equipment and all the other equipment that people are paying full price per month for, and some of them are getting kind of concerned about it. So some of the staff members had even mentioned it to me, and so that's the reason I brought this up. So Bart has done a good job, I think, getting some quotes and all on this. So Bart, you want to take this, you or Mr. Madden?
Yes, sir. There's 2 options on there. I think the one is with the key. It has the same code or swipe card to basically, it's like the one you have at City Hall. And then you have the one that's a little bit more with the door itself. I would lean more towards the door. That's what I will try to do, because if you use that gate, people still can jump over. Me and the gentleman talked about it, gave me the quote. And so that swipe card would let you in. If you access and try to get in there, the alarm will go off. And also, that's they keep it unlocked like that. Fire reasons, the fire marshal, it's just a code issue. And so that's the reason they kind of have that swipe card, but you still can use it, but the alarm will go off. And so, or we can keep it locked, but you've got to have a panic button there in case it was a fire and you have to evacuate. You have to press that button to get out. So I got these prices up. It's whatever y'all's thoughts are on that. We'll do whatever. That's all I have, Mr. Black. You got questions?
Thank you, Bart. I'm going to turn it over to, let's see if Mr. Reynolds and Mr. Manton got any comments or concerns or questions about this, and then we might have to come back with you. Mr. Reynolds, Mr. Manton, you got any comments or anything on this?
Just a couple of things. Knowing who utilizes the walking track, the primary demographic. I'm not sure that jumping the gate would necessarily be something that we would have to be concerned about. My biggest concern, and Mr. Cumlander brought this up, is a potential fire hazard with the door. So if we do end up going with the full door, I would want to make sure that that the contractor worked very closely with fire department, Chief McCone and his folks, to make sure that points of ingress and egress are not blocked, and that should there be an event, that people could get in and out safely.
I think that this, Bart had already discussed this with the fire marshal, and I think if you put a door in, it would still have like a push bar on it. And then, like he said, if it's activated, it set an alarm off, but it would be to where it could not be locked, in the event of emergency. But you could have access with the membership card or ID card, swipe card, whatever you decide to use on it. So is that in the long run, those lines, Bart?
That's correct, Mr. Black.
So I think that was one of the first things we discussed with TAP, was to make sure the safety thing was, because we don't want somebody to be locked up there at the back of the building and they can't get out through that back door down the steps if something was to happen. So, that's something that was discussed with the fire marshal. Mr. Reynolds,
That was all I had.
Thank you, Ms. Madden. Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Chairman Black. Mr. Cumlander, how much, how many people would you suspect are taking advantage of the system and paying for the 25-year access and walking down and using the equipment? Are we talking 10 people or 500?
It's probably 25, maybe a month. It's hard to know, because you cannot monitor that from the front desk. You can't see who's coming in and out there. I mean, they've came and got me, and then you gotta prove that they came through there, and you really don't know. So you don't want to upset folks when you ask them, say, do you have a full membership or do you have a walk-in membership? And so it's just more of lines of regulating who can go in and out and who is paying the full membership. So it's hard to say. I would say 20 to 25 during basketball season when we're busy, probably more. January is always your peak month. February is your peak month, because people say, hey, I'm going to go work out. They're going to first walk, and they say, well, I can just walk downstairs and lift weights and do whatever. So that's what we're just trying to regulate, some of that, because it's hard for the staff to keep up with that back end there. If you've ever been in that front, it's such a long way to look to see who's coming in and out back there. I hope
and there's a legitimate income loss here, where. Okay.
Yes, over the years, yes, because this has been going on a couple of years. Yes, sir.
Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Black. Thank you, Mr. Cumlander.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Everyone knows it's just common nature. If somebody knows how they can circumvent the rules, some of them will try it. I mean, most people are real honest, but you still gonna have some and say, well, come on, you can go with me. You don't have to pay to get in. I got a walking pass. We can go on down and do weights and all. And like I say, when the staff brings it to you, and some of you paid members for full membership bring it up, it must be a concern to them. So that's the reason I wanted Brandon and Mr. Cumlander to check on the possibility of how much it would cost to do this and make it as least inconvenient to the members as it is. So this is on the agenda tonight.
Mr. Black, one more question, if I may.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead, Mr.
And this may be for Miss Abercrombie, if she is with us. And Bart may have the answer. Brandon, you may have the answer as well. Just looking for the potential funding source on this. Where would this money come from?
Well, I suggested, I'm not sure if this is Brandon's. We had the $150,000 of recreation money set aside to do a park project that's not going to get done this year. So I suggested we use part of that money this year to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Adams.
It's in the budget.
Thank you, ma'am.
And just to let you know, I used to see a couple of people come down the back stairs in the morning that I suspect did not have full memberships.
Thank you, Mr. Black.
I think it says on here, Taft, is they projected fund as a capital projects fund, so I think that's what Holly was $150,000 on that. So
That's correct, Mr. Black.
okay, well, any other discussion on this while we got everybody on here, Bart and everybody? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the committee on this particular item? There's two different scenarios. I think one of them was a door and one of them was a gate. So, but both of them, regardless of door or gate, would be accessible in the event of an emergency where people could get out. They would not be trapped in there. But both of them would set off an alarm if somebody tried to breach the gate or the door without it being a legal entry to it. What's the pleasure of the committee on this?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the 8430 for the door at the back entry at the Sports Center to be funded out of the Capital Projects Fund.
I got a motion, Mr. Reynolds, that we approve out of the Capital Projects Fund 8430 for a door on the second floor of the Sports Center with all the safety apparatus and features and everything that we have mentioned during this conversation. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion, Mr. Reynolds. I have a second, Mr. Matty. Any additions, corrections, or any more discussion to this?
Only additional discussion, Mr. Chairman, is that I'm not sure how it's going to shake out or what my support would look like when it gets to full council. Primarily, I'm supporting it tonight because I'd like to get input from the rest of council, and having this as an agenda item on the full council meeting to allow them to do that would let that discussion be hopefully fruitful. So that's why I'm supporting it tonight.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second that we approve out of capital projects, the $8,430 for a door at the second floor, with the understanding that vote, one of the votes may change during the regular council meeting. Any other discussion on this?
Mr. Black,
Yes.
did the contractor give a timeline on when he would be able to start and complete the project?
Mr. Leonard.
I did not ask him that question, Mr. Reynolds. I'll try to have that answer for you next your council meeting, full council meeting.
Thank you, Mr.
I was just trying to get some prices up so we could bring it to y'all, and then but I'll find out a timeline for you.
Thank you, Mr. Cumlander.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I have a motion by Mr. Reynolds and a second, Mr. Matty, and all the discussion. What's the pleasure? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Mr. Reynolds, you're muted.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds, Mr. Matty, and myself, aye. So it's unanimous 3-0. That we take this to full council with a possible more discussion, and might be a change from a door to a gate. We don't know what the rest of the council's pleasure is on this, but we will move it to full council at the next regular council meeting. I see nothing else under new business. Do you know of anything, Mr. Matty, Mr. Cumlander? Nothing on the agenda.
No, sir, not at this time.
sir.
Okay. All right, thank you. Back down to public comments now. Do I have anybody out there, Mr. Public comments?
Yes, we have a number. Yes, sir. We have a number of members of the public who are currently participating in the video conference. No one has indicated that they want to speak at this time, but everyone's unmuted in case they want to speak up at this time. Okay. I don't think there's anybody that wants to speak, Mr. Black.
I just want to say, if they do want to speak, they need to state their name and address for the records, please. But you say there's none on there that would care to speak on public comment at this time?
Yeah, nobody has indicated so.
Any other council member have a public comment, anything? Public comments, what about committee concerns? Do I have any committee concerns?
No, Chairman.
No, Chairman.
All right, hearing no committee concerns from the members of the committee, what I hear on adjournment.
So moved.
I got a motion, Mr. Mandy, we adjourn the meeting to a second.
Second.
Second, Mr. Reynolds, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, the meeting will adjourn at approximately 6:41 PM. We appreciate everyone's attendance and cooperation and input. The next meeting will be the Public Works Committee meeting. Thank you, everyone.
I'm looking around. Miss King here. She's here. Miss Kuznar, are you online?
I am.
All right.
I'm not on this committee though.
Oops, sorry, I read the wrong.
I was waving for you there, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Reynolds, are you there? Mr. Reynolds, I got it now. Wrong sheet. Okay. Everybody here, ready to go. This is the third committee meeting on May the 4th, 2020, approximately 6:40 p.m. I'll call it to order. Our first item on the agenda is public comment. Mr. Madden, if you will unmute everyone from the public, and if anyone speaks up or shakes their hand or whatever, they're welcome to speak.
I don't think has any comments at this time from the public.
Okay, we'll have a second opportunity toward the end for public comment. If anyone is listening and can get all prepped and ready to go, and recognize you again toward the end of that for Recreation. The Public Works Committee. I'll get straight here. First, next item on agenda is Public Works Committee meeting minutes of April the 6th, 2020. Pleasure of council, of committee.
Motion to approve as submitted.
I have a motion from Ms. King. Is there a second?
Second from Reynolds.
Mr. Reynolds seconds. Any discussion on the minutes as submitted?
I have none, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. King. All right, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. None. The minutes are accepted as submitted, 3-0. Next item is our report of communication to city officers, a departmental report with Mr. Madden or Mr. Fleishman.
I think Matthew, if you can provide a quick budget update.
On the budget update, I actually ran it yesterday morning with Laura. Parks, streets, and sanitation are pretty much right where they need to be. Sewer has more. They're actually their number's a little bit inflated because you still have to take out the depreciated value, but they still are significantly higher than where they need to be at this point. But other than that, we're looking good.
Okay, Scott here, an update on Springfield Park basketball court update.
Yes. So, one of the reasons the basketball court surface is deteriorating is that some people can drive. Well, some people choose to drive on it from the parking lot, and there's a couple residents around in the area that ride like four-wheelers on the court surface. And as a measure to restrict vehicle access, Public Works is recommending erecting a fence around the structure. Currently, there's just a fence on either of the goal sides. There's nothing on the sides that face the parking lot or the apartment complex. We've worked with Bart Cumlander out of Recreation and received a bunch of quotes. The quote itself to move forward will be paid for with the remainder of money that Bart has left in his account for the resurfacing project. Initially, we had proposed Public Works covering any remainder, but with the quote in where it is, we're just going to cover it with the remaining funds.
Okay, remaining funds from where? I've got
So-
Public Works funds for maintaining the parks.
Yeah, so Bart had
Capital,
a capital purchase, yes, for the playground restoration. And the remaining, what, $6,229 was the remaining funds from the project itself. The quote for the fencing is $3,121.
okay, I seem to have lost all audio from Mr. Fleesman.
Okay, Mayor, can you hear me, Mayor?
Just got you, Brandon.
Okay, yeah, essentially, the surfacing project Springfield Park, council allocated approximately $25,000. Not expended all of those funds in resurfacing the park, purchasing the new goals, and also paving the court, the basketball court. So the remaining funds from that fund we use to pay for fencing. Any overages that occur will be taken care of through the available funding in Public Works. So the short answer is there's funding within council's currently approved budget to cover this expense.
Okay. Any questions from committee members?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Fleeman, is a 4-foot fence going to be too close to the actual basketball playing surface where it could become a safety issue for those playing basketball? I understand the point is obviously to keep people off of the surface. But on the safety side of that, would that be too short of a fence or does it need to be a taller fence?
We certainly could go with a taller fence. We have prices for it as well. It would really just be at the discretion of council. When you start going with a taller fence, it starts to look like a cage.
Mm-hmm.
And like kind of like an inner city basketball court. And if it's at the pleasure of council, we certainly can do that.
But I guess my question is, we can place the 4-foot fence far enough back where it's not a safety issue with those playing on the court. That's probably more along the lines of what I'm looking for.
We certainly can do that.
Okay. That would be my only concern with this, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Any other questions or comments about staff on the Springfield Park basketball court? I know in normal basketball, when you have an out of bounds, you have to throw it in from out of bounds. So there's only about a foot and a half, 2 foot from the side of the edge of the table. I was out there earlier. I didn't see the striping, so I don't know where the striping would be. But if it's at the end of where they resealed it, or are going to put the sealer down, it was only like a foot and a half, maybe 2 feet at most on the side. That if the fence will be beyond that, just allow you enough room to throw it in bounds and not have to go outside the fence to throw it in bounds.
I think the other suggestion I would have is contacting, if this is something that moves forward quickly, I'm sorry, Chairman.
Oh, you're good.
Thank you. Contact, if we can get with the contractor that is currently, will be doing the fence around the playground right there. If we could piggyback this into the same project. Because you'll have city park, the new playground equipment, which won't be delivered for the next, I think we heard in the other committee meeting, at least a few weeks. So we're several weeks out from that. It may be a chance to save some money by piggybacking it with the same contractor. That's all I had. Thank you, Mr. Fleeman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Ms. King, you good? Okay. Next update, Matt, would be the stormwater update for Springfield Park. I am very interested in this. I took a lot of pictures down there a while ago, so lay it on me.
Yeah, so stormwater at the Springfield Park is complicated. It currently everything comes off the parking lot in the lower end in the vicinity of where the new playground will be located. If you've been out there, you've seen that the location of the proposed playground, there's no grass. It's all sand and silt and just washout. So we've looked at it and we have evaluated it and determined that we will have to construct a catch basin at the base of the parking lot, and we'll end up having to pipe about 750 linear feet down around the shelter, along the baseball fields, to the concession stand, and down towards the river. There were ways to do it just to kind of divert the flow so that we could build the playground, but you're really just pushing the problem to some other location at the park. So we determined that we should just address the whole stormwater issue all at once, because if you've been down there, you know that in front of the concession stand, it actually pools there because the storm drain it's higher than the asphalt.
Just lost him again audio wise.
You can't hear me?
Can anybody else hear him? Because I lost him. Okay. I saw the hand gesture, but.
All right.
I still had him the whole time.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I know the neighbors on the back side of that ditch will welcome the opportunity to hear you talk about the river, because they definitely would also have used that phrase in the past on stormwater runoff. So I don't know that it's a navigable river, but there's definitely some water standing in that stream. It's not flowing as of a little while ago. One of the things I noticed, of course, when we redid that parking lot to put in the restroom facility, there was some scaping done there to control some of that water over there. But yeah, water running down that hill. In the past, we've had that issue, even with the swing sets, when we've had water down there. But in the past, there were things called gutters and curbing that controlled a lot of that water and directed it to the catch basin at the northwest corner of the parking lot. I understand, or I've got the pictures today showing that curbing is severely broken up and even gone in the area where it allows the water to do what you said it was doing. And I saw the flow there. So one thing I would suggest is maybe even reinstalling that curbing may help direct that water to the other catch basin. It's on the northwest corner of the parking lot. Another observation, I got pictures for you there, is if you removed all of the brush and stuff that clogging up that basin, water might flow through it. And that's an existing water basin. Then you go down toward the baseball field, down along the fence line there, where there's a little concrete spillway, if you will, that water has traditionally run, and it runs under where the bleachers are at right now. There is a probably 12 to 18-inch pipe there. It's hard to see right now because that grate is also totally blocked. Runoff, sediment, and what do we call those things? Huckleberries or whatever, the cockleberries. It's got all that blocked. And if you walk on down from there where it goes down to your referenced river, that pipe is there, but the water is standing in it. If you look at the grate, it's on the first base side of field 4. Then it goes on down, and there is a catch basin there with a concrete cover that catches the water before it dumps it into the alleged river. That is also covered up because it hasn't been maintained. They hadn't cut the lips around it, so very little water gets in there. So all that said, I think there is some low-hanging fruit that may help somewhat. We've had that problem for all the years I've been down in that, going to that park, so I do understand some of it. But to propose a 750 feet stormwater project that's been there for a long time, that didn't go through capital budget time, I find kind of difficult, unless there's just money laying around that you're going to use for park funds to use that. I would not be favorable to consider transferred money from street stormwater to a park stormwater project. I think our citizens deserve street stormwater attention besides just a park. I do understand we're putting in a high dollar playground, and I wouldn't want to destroy that, but I think more discussion needs to be had. But that's just my 2 cents worth. I guess that was more like a nickel's worth. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a few responses. Can you hear me?
I got you now.
Okay, so that lower on the northwest corner of the catch basin, the reason water can't get there is that enormous tree has grown and pushed up the asphalt. So water has to make it up a hill to go to that catch basin. And one of the original proposals I had was to take the tree away, but I was under my understanding that we could not remove that tree because it's of some significant value to the city. But as it continues to grow, it's pushing the parking lot up, creating essentially like a dam that's going to divert it where it has washed away the gutters and curbing. Hanging fruit, taking a tree down would be actually beneficial if the city was willing to do it.
Yeah, I'm looking at the picture I took, and I'm not seeing the incline there. I'm just showing. I don't know if y'all can see that on the camera or not, but that's the catch basin in question there at the northwest corner, and something slowed down there pretty good because, of course, all the curbs broken away, so that helped it flow there. So that was just a point I was trying to make, and I'll try to make all these pictures available to you. I'll put them on a thumb drive where you can look at them, kind of thing, because I don't disagree with the overall assessment that stormwater needs to be better controlled there. I think a few of us have been hearing stormwater issues throughout our city, so and that includes our park. Anything, Mr. Reynolds?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think certainly making sure we're making an investment into the playground there, making sure we're doing a good job of addressing the issues that are there. The only concern I did have was you mentioned it was having that funding source out of the capital from stormwater. I would prefer to see that come out of one of, wrap it into the capital projects with the playground equipment or something like that. I'd rather see that go over budget than pull that from stormwater budget. But other than that, I have not been out there to see it, but I know that the times that we've played on those fields, it's evident by the way the grass grows and the the concrete is busted, the asphalt is busted up, that there's clearly drainage issues that need to be taken care of. So, Mr. Fleeman, is this the 7,500 would cover the full, that would take care of all that you're suggesting? Okay. Talk to me then.
7,500 plus money from street department drainage.
Okay.
Going to come in about, to do the whole thing right, would cost $22,000.
Okay. So the 7,500 I saw on there was just to mitigate some of the cost.
It was what you guys had budgeted to address it.
Okay. No, one thing I would say, Mr. Fleeman, is I appreciate being proactive in making sure we're not damaging the investment we just made on the parks playground equipment. So certainly it needs to be addressed.
Chairman, Mayor, if I may just add a couple things that maybe enhance the discussions. So funding was set aside for this project in the budget. Going back and looking at what that could address, and given the fact that we're making a significant investment in putting a new playground there, it didn't seem appropriate to make that investment and then continue to have the storm drainage issues impacting not just the playground area, but the entire lower baseball fields. And so that's the reason why it's being presented now as a way to address it, and then put the playground in, because it may not be ideal to have a new playground in. We receive a significant rain, floods the playgrounds, and it continues to erode the ground there. And so that was the reason for bringing it. There was funding set aside in drainage, in streets for drainage projects. Based on the city ordinance, the drainage project, the funding that's set aside for drainage projects would be either on city-owned property or city right-of-way. We're approaching the end of the fiscal year. A large project there, which is the reason why this was presented. Proceed at the pleasure of council. Different direction. Staff definitely will heed to that and proceed that way.
Chairman, you don't block off your entire schedule for these committee meetings to make sure nobody calls you?
Yeah, that's the home phone, and I don't use it, so I can't say anything about the other two residents of this facility.
Well, I was telling someone a couple days ago, I have never had a landline my entire life, which is foreign to some people.
Yeah, I actually did give up my rotary phone, though, if that helps. Okay, thank you, Mr. Madden. I heard that as far as the funds you're talking about are in the street capital for projects that are on city right away or on city property. You're not taking away from potential residents' ability to get attention. Is the way I understood what you said.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Anything else on this?
Chairman, does this need approval, or was this a recommendation? Was this?
This was just a status
update. Okay, I just scrolled back up and looked. Thank you.
It was just an update, but at the same time, any thoughts that council have, if we haven't pressed we haven't hit the start button yet. So if we need to back up and not proceed, we would like to hear that direction as well.
I can't speak for anybody else, but again, making a significant advance investment in our parks and our equipment there, certainly we need to make sure we're taking care of the ground up under it as well.
Mr. Mayor.
Ms. King.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I would just like to add that considering the clarification that Mr. Madden has made on the funding source for this, I think that we need to move forward with a recommendation of staff, considering the cost of the playground that's going in, considering the cost of the concession stand and bathrooms that we invested in a few years ago. I just think that this is something that we don't need to ignore any longer to cause possible future damage to our facilities.
Okay, thank you, Mr. King. Anything else, Mr. Reynolds? All right, seeing none on there. Stormwater, that was, all right, anything else from staff?
No, Mr. Mayor, not at this time.
Okay, all right, thank you. Budget review, I think Matthew covered that. Moving to the next unfinished item, Brook Bend Road project. From that standpoint, let me get to that page. Sorry about that. Okay, we're back to that item. Mr. Madden, Mr. Fleeman, want to do a recap and a suggested way forward or consideration? I know we helped this from last month.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this item was presented to committee last month. It was held in committee and it's being presented back. Essentially, as a request that was initiated from a resident in February this year regarding a sinkhole and flooding that was experienced on her property and the property adjacent to it on Brook Bend Road. It boils down to a pipe that has failed from her property, and so when water flows, the stormwater flows, it's not flowing properly. And so staff performed an assessment of the system, the stormwater system there on Brook Bend at 136 Brook Bend Road. The amount that needed to be done as far as the materials came out to right at about $6,000. Staff presented that amount to the property owner per city policy that the city will provide labor and equipment, but the cost of materials would be borne by the property owner. The property owner declined to pay the cost of materials. And at this point, we're presenting it to committee. If the committee would like to absorb the cost of the materials to move forward, because at this time, based on the city's policy, staff cannot proceed and would not move forward. And so it's being presented to the committee for direction. Should council proceed, a utility easement would be requested from the property owner at 132 Brook Bend Road to assist in the repair that staff has developed. For the repair would be 6 to 8 weeks. That may be mitigated by the fact that a lot of our staff members are currently being used to assist in essential services during the COVID-19 situation we're going through now. And so that's the request that's in front of council. It's essentially a policy decision that we're requesting direction on.
Okay, do you have an estimated total cost? If the option would be to remove this particular drainage off of Ms. Fetterman's property and take Mr. Ireland's generous offer to put it on a vacant lot that he owns, and corresponding legal easements and all that could be acquired. What's the total cost projection I know it involves blocking off the existing drainage out of that catch basin, setting a new catch basin, and piping it down to the open ditch in the back of the property. What's the total cost projection for doing that?
Right now, we have it at $5,825. Mr. Fleeman, would you like to elaborate?
I'm not hearing anything again. I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on.
Right now, the cost of, Mr. Mayor, can you hear me? Can you hear me now, Mr. Mayor?
Got you now.
Okay. The total cost of the materials is $5,825. Mr. Fleeman, would you care to elaborate?
Sure. We have to take the existing catch basin, turn the pipe out of it. We'll then have to set a new catch basin and run down to the surface water feature in the backyard. Because of the location of the existing pipe, which is collapsing, part of the cost estimate is the cost to pump that abandoned line with flowable fill to seal it up so that it doesn't continue to collapse and affect the foundation of her structure.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Reynolds.
quick question, Mr. Fleeman.
Sure.
Can you break down for me how much of the estimate includes exactly what you just said to pump into her line and fill it, the flowable fill? How much of the estimate is that?
Just about $2,000.
Thank you, Mr. Fleeman. I think as I've thought about this, I drove by there just eyeballing everything, and I'm no stormwater expert and won't pretend to be, but certainly there's an issue there. We have done work like this in the past. My concern comes back to our homeowners having an investment in their property as well, and it not being solely the city's responsibility. But I'll let the other members speak to this, because certainly there's an issue there and we need to start addressing it.
Mr. Mayor, may I speak?
Yes, Ms. King.
Thank you. I agree with you, Mr. Reynolds. You know, we kept this in committee last month to, it's basically for our workshop so that we would have more information provided. And in this case, I feel for the homeowner, and but then I struggle with our ordinance that says we can't go on legally on private property. Personally, I wouldn't be opposed if committee would like to entertain and discuss tonight the possibility of the city obtaining the easement and perhaps entertaining with the homeowner the possibility of the homeowner taking some responsibility in the cost of the pipe that's running beside their home, which, if I understood Mr. Fleeman correctly, that would be approximately $2,000 for that portion of the project. You know, until we have some type of policy, I would love to see us have a stormwater fund for this sort of thing in the future that we could draw from. But again, I think it's a slippery slope, and we need to move forward cautiously, but at the same time, try to address the needs of our resident, especially in this case. So I'll let y'all have comment and feedback on that.
Thank you, Ms. King. I concur with Ms. King and Mr. Reynolds that, you know, I can recall what we did over in Forester Woods, and we basically took those stormwater pipes that no one in the city ever installed. Some were and were not documented by the county years ago when we finally annexed Forester Woods into the city of Mauldin. So we also have had a briefing. It's clear that we're a co-permittee with the county of Greenville for stormwater management, and that involves looking at catch bases and signing off on that. It's not an ongoing maintenance permit on private property with the county of Greenville. They've made it clear they do not do work on private property. Our ordinance is very clear. We do not do work on private property. We've made exceptions on areas that have mitigating circumstances, like this one does. The flow coming from 3 different avenues that flows into that catch basin that goes through the pipe. We didn't install the pipe. Public Works didn't install the pipe. City of Mauldin didn't install the pipe. County of Greenville, I can't speak to that, but the pipe's been there and it's collapsing. So as far as blocking off that catch basin where there is no stormwater flow going to Miss Fetterman's property and her pipe, I'm okay with taking Mr. Ireland's generous offer to give us an easement and whatever legal advice we can do to go down through his vacant lot to get to that drainage open ditch in the back and put pipe in there and put a new catch basin in, I think would be a good compromise, and it serves the stormwater runoff of those 3 streets and that entire neighborhood on that back side there. So there's a public good for doing that. I think once we have the water redirected down a pipe that we install and have the appropriate legal documents to do, then I think Ms. Fetterman then would need to step up to repair her yard. Very similar to what the residents in Forester Woods did. Once we got the water flowing where it was in the public right of way, each property owner took it upon themselves to fill in their sinkholes, do landscaping, and block off whatever pipes they had to leak type thing. I think that's a valid compromise, and that's kind of where we're at. And I guess that would be what I would hope this committee would consider and recommend to move forward to, at least help the public good of getting the water going to an approved direction away from a foundation and a utility building out back of Ms. Fetterman's property that no one has ownership of that pipe, but it's on private property and the law is clear. Our ordinances are clear. That is a property owner's responsibility. And it breaks my heart to say that, but if somebody started a GoFundMe account to help Ms. Fetterman on that, I would definitely follow along with it. But the city can't continue this until we get a better ordinance, and I think we've got some avenues to look at that. So this is my Nichols' comment, and I'll give it back to Ms. King. Got anything else?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to add, would it be appropriate for a committee to request Mr. Madden to reach back out to Ms. Federland and see if that's a compromise that she can agree to, and then bring it back to committee for us to move forward with?
Absolutely. Ms. King, staff will reach back out to Ms. Federline and communicate that request to her and report back.
And Mr. Mayor, I'd also add I wouldn't have a problem if we wanted to move it forward to the next council meeting if, we got the response back to her in a timely manner prior to the May 18th meeting, and therefore we wouldn't be holding this up for another month and a half.
Okay, thank you, Ms. King. Mr. Reynolds.
I was actually going to say that very thing, so I'd second that. Is certainly I don't have a problem forward this to, if there's an appropriate response, then that way it's not held up any further. I'd certainly be in agreement to that as well. And if I'm doing my math correctly, that would go from 5825 to roughly 5,000. We could even put a cap on it or something like that.
I lost audio again, but that's okay. I think I understood what you were saying. Okay, Mr. Madden, anything to add, or Mr. Fleeman?
The only thing I would add is that the price estimate that I provided does not include any attorney fees.
Still have no audio, but.
Chairman, can you hear me?
I just heard.
Can you hear me?
There you are. I heard you, Matthew. I heard you now.
Okay. The only thing I wanted to add was that 58, the quote that I provided does not include attorney's fees or any of the costs associated with the easement and acquiring the property.
Thank you, Mr. Fleeman. I saw that in there and wanted to ask that question, but I appreciate you bringing that up as well.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. So if I understand from committee, we would ask the staff to pursue a negotiated options with Ms. Fetterman, and at the same time, would we entertain forwarding this to full council pending feedback from staff prior to the full council meeting, and with the option at full council to either bring it back or take it up for a vote to proceed with the maintenance. Is that what I'm kind of hearing from Ms. King and Mr. Reynolds?
Yes, sir. That's good with me.
Would you like to put that in the form of a motion?
Sure. I will make the motion to forward to full council the consideration for the work to be done of stormwater repair at Brookbend, with the only if the negotiation or the compromise with Ms. Fetterland is reached prior to our committee meeting. I mean, our council meeting. Boy, I just flubbed that up. So I make the motion to forward it to council in the event that staff is able to reach a compromise with the funding with the homeowner.
It's okay. He didn't have audio he didn't have audio the whole time. He'll just put it the way he wants it. I'll second it.
I have been accused of doing that, but no, I actually heard her that time. And it has to be in the
It's
form.
my cleanup version.
Yeah, I got it. It has to be a motion to move to council, pending the, well, not pending, but, and also staff trying to negotiate with Ms. Fetterman, but I don't know that the motion to move to full council can be conditional out of committee. So if we move it out, then full council can, based on the feedback from staff, full council will then either kick it back to this committee or take it up or down vote kind of thing. So I think I am correct on understanding the motion out of a standing committee.
Okay, then I will amend the motion to forward to full council the recommendation for stormwater repair at Brookbend Road.
Thank you, Ms. King. Mr. Reynolds, you're okay with the, instead of an amendment, we'll just accept your motion to forward to full council with instructions to staff to attempt to negotiate a settlement with an agreeable settlement with Ms. Fetterman. Is that okay?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is that okay with you, Ms. King?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, and so I have Mr. Reynolds a second on that. Any discussion on it?
One other quick thing, just pointing out, Mr. Fleeman, I appreciate your hard work on this stuff. We know it's going to be an issue and a recurring thing, and probably going to feel like you're bringing this up, not this particular property, but within the city for a long, long time. But certainly appreciate your expertise and patience in how we deal with this. So thank you, Mr. Fleeman.
You're welcome.
As public officials, we're not used to flowing water issues. We're kind of used to shoveling some other issues. Got that. All right. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Good. Unanimous forward to full council with instructions to staff to attempt a negotiation with Ms. Fetterman and with Mr. Ireland on his property. Okay. Thank you, group. That was the end of unfinished business. They are now under new business. There's a request to move funds to streets capital for a skid steer. So the staff wants to handle this item.
Certainly. So we had made a request a couple committees meetings ago to sell all the old damaged equipment at Public Works. We have finished the sale of all the equipment on Gov Deals and generated a total of $75,473.57. Now with that $75,000 and change, that money went to the general fund. And during the committee meetings, I had said that once the sales are final, I was make a recommendation to committee to move forward with a capital purchase. A lot of what you do in public works is you do a bunch of different jobs and you don't use the equipment all the time. Things like mixing concrete, clearing sewer right-of-ways, milling roads. And if you spent the capital to acquire all the pieces of machinery to do those jobs, you spend a lot of money and the equipment sits for a lot of time because you're not milling every day. A skid steer with high flow hydraulics allows you to purchase attachments that perform these duties at a much reduced cost. And the skid steer itself can be used for general construction duties, cleaning out ditches, moving soil. We have an old skid steer. It does not have the capability to use a lot of the attachments that are marketable nowadays. Its pretty much only use is moving dirt, and we do use it. But with this funds, we are looking to acquire this new piece of machinery, allow us to move in the right direction in the department. And over the next few budget years, acquire things like vibratory roller for asphalt work, concrete mixer, milling machine, things that would be appropriate for our department to have. But right now, we're looking to purchase the machine itself and not to exceed $64,000, which leaves $15,000 in the general fund. And we're looking to buy off the state contract, a Kubota SVL. Did you get that?
Last thing I heard was not to exceed $64,000. Then when it started talking about the leftover money, it sounded like you were trying to spend it too, but I lost audio, so I'm just making that part up.
The leftover money will just go to the general fund, and you guys can.
Okay. Still don't have audio from you, but that's okay. Not okay, but I mean, I'm understanding that I must have a glitch here somewhere. And I'll take just a minute to run out my door and ask my 17-year-old if she's live streaming some video or something that's sucking the bandwidth out of my home system because I'm losing audio. Question that I'll pose right now, and Mr. Madden can answer, maybe everybody else can hear. Did the money that from the sale of the disposal go into the general fund, or did it go into the capital projects fund?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's a great question. By policy, it goes into the capital projects fund, which is, and the fund, the capital projects fund is made up a lot of general fund dollars. So, but it will go automatically into the capital projects fund by policy that council approved surplus property. And just so you know, this item created some confusion at the budget works, the previous budget workshop when we talked about the CIP. Matthew is extremely correct. It was always meant to be presented in this manner, but for some reason it accidentally ended up in the budget for next year. Public Works and all of our departments do a great job with using existing resources. But there are times when the existing equipment is not enough for the city as we continue to grow. And this purchase is a prime example of the growth of the city and the capability and capacity of the Public Works Department to do more exotic work. And when I mean more exotic work, more than just your baseline of public work jobs. They can do more if they had the equipment to do more. And in the long run, it would save the city money because more of the operations can be performed in-house as opposed to being contracted out. So this skid steer is an example of that. The funding source will be the capital projects fund. The money that's replaced in the capital projects fund from the revenues generated from the sale of surplus property. Unbudgeted, it's over $5,000, and that's why we're presenting it this way. But that was the intent in January, was to present it this way.
Okay, thank you. I heard somebody,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Reynolds.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fleeman, what do you plan on doing with the current piece of equipment that you have? Will you be gov dealing that one as well?
No, we still use that. We'll gift it to the Parks Department for moving mulch, pine straw. It's still functional, but right now Parks and Streets share it, and this way it would allow Parks to have one to suit their needs and Streets to suit its needs and potential growth of the department.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Fleeman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Ms. King. I hear birds chirping. I don't know if that's Miss
Michael Reynolds, birds. I pushed the wrong button.
Okay.
I'm back. I'd be happy to go ahead and make a motion if y'all are ready. Mr. Reynolds is shaking.
If you don't, I will.
Okay, I'll try to do a better job this go around. I'll make a motion to forward to council the request to transfer $64,000 within the capital projects fund to budget line 431-000-970 for the capital purchase of a skid steer to be maintained by our streets department.
Okay, I have a motion from Ms. King. Is there a second?
I have a second.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I have a second. Is there any discussion?
No, Mr. Chair.
Nothing from Mr. Reynolds, Ms. King, nothing.
Good.
Only question I have is, Matthew, what comes with the skid steers? It got a scrape blade, push blade, tow hitch, anything with it other than just a skid steer?
It'll typically come with a flat bottom bucket, and then we can look into expanding next budget year.
I got it. Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none, we're ready for a vote. All those in favor of Ms. King's motion to forward to full council for consideration of $64,000 to the Streets 970 account. I couldn't remember the rest of the numbers, but I remember it was 970. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
I got a thumbs up, Mr. Reynolds, and I lost audio, but I saw Ms. King's mouth move and it looked aye. There we go. All right, I just heard it back. So 3-0, we're there. So we forward that to full council. I have texted my household to see if somebody is using the Wi-Fi. They're killing me. Okay, we are now back to public comment. Mr. Madden, you want to open it up and see if there's anybody waving their hand or speaking up on public comment? I see we have a couple of people there.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Black.
on your stormwater issue on Brook Bend Road on page 13 of the documentation presented to council. In the first paragraph, it says the house was completed in 1967. It's a moot point. We moved in 72. That was a vacant lot in 67.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Black.
Matthew, you're talking about relocating the catch basin. Is there any way to utilize the existing catch basin to save funds and maybe put a 45
But he can unmute
over to a new pipe if so be it?
I got my Saxon Racing email address on there.
All right, so anytime you turn a pipe with water, you want to do that in a catch basin. So the plan was to reuse the existing catch basin to come out of it at like a 45-degree angle into another catch basin where you could straighten the pipe all the way down to the stormwater feature.
So you're not talking about a new one off of the street on Brookbend Road, just taking another catch basin from this one and putting another one next to it?
No, it will go probably about 15 to 20 feet at a 45-degree angle, set a catch basin, and then run all the way back. Because we have to.
Go ahead.
We where the catch basin is, that the line runs underneath that building and her fence and through her yard. And so what we need to do is we need to get it over into that vacant lot and then run it down. So we'll come out of her basin at an angle into another basin about 15, 20 feet away, and then run straight back to the surface water.
Leave the existing catch basin with the curbing and all and just create a new one.
That's correct.
Okay. Another question. What if Ms. Federline cannot afford or does not want to pay the approximately $2,000 for the flowable fill in the pipe? Where does this project go? Now, it's not her problem. It's not the city's problem. As the mayor stated, it's not the county's problem. Somebody authorized or didn't have to authorize at that time that this was built for that water to come off of the street in about 3 directions on Brookbend to get back into a ditch which got into Gilder Creek. So, I mean, if she does not agree or does not have the money, where does this project stand at that point?
We certainly could still move forward with the project and get the stormwater off of her property, but she is left with a potential hazard on her property where that pipe can continue to collapse. And it could do damage to her structure, or if it happened in her backyard, you know, you could open up another sinkhole.
Yeah, I realize, and we've discussed this many times, she didn't create it, the city didn't create it, but she is left with the problem on her property. So, I mean, this is not the only scenario in the city, but we have many probably will come up because of the rules and regulations at that time, or no rules and regulations at that time, were allowed to do stuff in subdivisions and turn water back into a drainage ditch or a creek to get them off of the streets. So, I mean, it's not our fault, it's not her fault, but, you know, it looks like she's going to be made to pay, or the city's going to be made to pay the price to get this water off of the street. That's going to benefit the whole town of Mauldin, all the citizens that drive up and down the streets, or the 3 or 4 streets that dump into this catch basin. And if we do not fix this, how is the water that's going across Mr. Ireland's property now going to affect his vacant lot because of the stoppage on the storm drain there now? They cannot take the water back to the creek. Just some thoughts for the committee to consider. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Anyone else, Mr. Madden? Seeing or hearing anyone? Do you see anybody with their hand, Mr. Madden?
No, Mayor, I do not see anybody waving.
Okay. That being said, we'll move to committee concerns. Does anyone have any?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir, I'm good. Thank you.
Oh, you're good. I'm sorry. All right. Thank you. Mr. Reynolds.
No, Chairman, thank you.
Not hearing any. What do I, next item is adjournment. What do I hear on adjournment?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Got a motion from Mr. Reynolds.
Second.
Being a second, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned at 7:40 p.m. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. The follow-up meeting is going to be the Finance and Policy Committee meeting.
I'm
It'll
still
take everybody
here.
just a minute. We'll let the screens rearrange for all the people who need to be on it.
Yeah. Dad, I'm gonna step out and see if I can find some Wi-Fi.
Okay. I am going to go ahead and call this Finance and Policy Committee meeting to order. The date is Monday, May 4th. It's approximately 7:40. This is the fourth committee meeting being held virtually. We have members present are myself, Chairman Reynolds, Ms. Kuznar, as well as Ms. King. And as per our normal conversations, since we're meeting virtually, certainly we need to try to keep our mics muted when we're not talking. Mr. Madden's done an excellent job on the previous meetings on trying to mute when he could and keep all the background noise from going on, but try to speak slowly and clearly, and we will labor through this thing. All right, so we are called to order. Our committee members are present. We have Ms. Abercrombie as well as Mr. Putnam and Mr. Madden are all present as well. The first item on our agenda is public comment. Mr. Madden, if you could look for waving hands or anybody dying to talk to this committee.
Chairman Reynolds, I do not see anyone waving their hand to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Madden. All right, moving on. Reading and approval of minutes. These are from the minutes, March 2nd, 2020. These are pages 4 through 6 in your packet. What do I hear on those?
Motion to approve as submitted.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to approve as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 3-0. Meeting minutes are approved. If you guys will bear with me, I've got screens all over the place, cords all over the place, and dogs, so we'll try to get through this. Okay, next item on our agenda is a departmental reports from, first up, we have Mr. Madden, then we'll have Ms. Abercrombie as well as Mr. Putnam.
Chairman Reynolds, members of the committee, at this time, the administration department is well within our parameters this month with 2 months remaining in the fiscal year. So we're well within our parameters.
Thank you, Mr. Madden. Ms. Abercrombie.
As for pretty much all departments across the board are pretty good. And as for revenues, they all look really good. Well, I'm not gonna say really good. Property taxes are still good. Hospitality and accommodations were actually surprisingly okay. Not as bad as a hit as I thought it was going to be. And then the only thing that we have outstanding is the business license, and we will find that out whenever the deadline comes and we get that money. But other than that, everything looks good.
Thank you, Ms. Abercrombie. Scrolling through the numbers, they're not as significant as what I had the concern to, that we may see, but certainly we're still in the middle of this and in the thick of it, and it takes a little bit of time for those things to come through. So I appreciate you keeping your eye on it and keeping us informed. Your monthly budget updates are thorough and extremely helpful. All right, next item we have is Mr. Putnam, our HR director.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman, Mr. Reynolds. We are heavily doing some recruiting, as you can imagine, for 2 positions that we have. And one I wanted to bring y'all up to date on is our fire chief. I have done 11 interviews over the phone. 10 of those were from the outside. One was from the inside. I have pushed up to Brandon 6 interviews that he will be doing over the next 2 weeks, beginning on the 11th, moving through the week of the 18th. 5 of those candidates are from outside, and 1 is from inside. So we hope to be moving forward with that the middle of May, and have toward the end of May some candidates, finalists that we can get in for interviews in front of council, and especially the public safety committee.
Thank you. You said you had 2 updates?
No, that's all I have.
That was the only one? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Putnam. Ms. King, who sits on this committee, I'm sure is anxiously awaiting that hire. Okay. So that is all for our department updates.
Michael, Mr. Reynolds.
Ma'am, Ms. King.
Could I ask Holly a question, please?
You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Real quick, Holly,
Yeah.
and it may be too early, but have you, and I don't mean for you to compare, but are you surprised by, my bottom line question is, are there any business license that are, I know, for example, we have sent business license monies to the city of Mauldin. Are you still seeing those come in at a number that may not be what you had projected, considering we've had, as of right now, postponed that due date till May 23rd?
They are, right now, business licenses are trailing a little behind from where they were at, this time last year.
Which is to be expected.
Right, correct.
Yeah. But is it encouraging the numbers that you're seeing at this point, or really no comment?
I would say no comment on that right now. That one's still that's still too early to tell.
Sure, it's only May the 4th.
I was just kind of shocked at I really thought the H&As were going to be worse than they were. So I was kind of really shocked on those.
But I think it's worth noting that shows the strong businesses that we have that were able to continue with the takeout type businesses. And I think we all know who those businesses are. So we will not take as big a hit as some other cities.
Right.
Because of that, which is good. And I think it's also worth noting that those revenues are for this budget, not for the upcoming budget. So when we're talking about the hit financially for COVID, is within our current budget. Now, not to say it won't linger into the new budget year, but it's where we are now. Okay. Yep. Thank you, Ms. Holly.
You're welcome.
Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Ms. King. Great question. Okay. So first item on our agenda is unfinished business. This was an item that was tabled from a couple of months ago. Public comment rules, pages 7 through 23. This was not staff initiated. This was something that was brought forward as a couple of council members had questioned how public comments are handled during public meetings. Mr. Brandon, could you give us a quick update while I'm scrolling through, and then we'll talk.
Yes, Mr. Reynolds, members of the committee, what you have before you is a request that was initiated by council, members of council, who had some concerns regarding the way public comment is outlined in our council and committee rules. Included in your agenda packet are comments from members of council regarding that, and excerpts from the Greenville County Council rules. And essentially it boils down to how this committee and council would like the rules for public comments to be spelled out in their council rules and their committee rules. And so at this point, staff is requesting direction from council.
Thank you, Mr. Madden. Okay, so in your packet, this is actually pretty long because what included was the current rules as well as county rules and then a proposed rule in there. Has everyone had a chance to read over changes that we were looking at? All right, so without can I get some thoughts on what you're reading?
Mr. Reynolds.
Ms. King.
Thank you. I was trying to get my pages coordinated so they would be side by side here to discuss, try to discuss this in a virtual format. It's a little difficult. I'm having trouble forming words, obviously, but as I stated in our last meeting, I personally don't have an issue with Section 4, number 1, as it's currently written. I understand the purpose behind the proposed amendment. I like some portions of the proposed amendment. Others, I'm not so sure, and this verbiage would be totally necessary, as like the flow of our current number 1 under Section 4. What I would like for a committee to consider is this something that could possibly be announced at the, instead of changing, I mean, we could tweak it a little bit. I'm not in favor of going 100% with the proposed amendment, but I was thinking that before the public comment, especially, and I don't guess it really matters if there's one person that signed up to speak or if there's 10 people, but for the mayor, as he is leading the meeting, to remind the public that council does not interact and comment, that the chair of the committee is, may comment if appropriate, or refer to the city administrator for him to contact these folks at a later date, or to even address on the floor, depending on what the question is. I'm not so sure. I think it's just educating the public has been my concern, so that they realize that we're not going to get into conversations with them during public comment. A lot of times when someone comes up for the first time to speak, or their 10th time to speak, I feel personally like sometimes they're looking at you, wanting you to interact and to comment. And trust me, there's a lot of times I want to, but that's not the time and the place for that to happen. So to summarize it, I'm not sure that it's necessary to amend this section 100% versus just making a comment at the beginning of public comment to explain the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. King. Ms. Kuznar, do you have any? I never did a mic check on you guys, but I heard Ms. King, but Ms. Kuznar.
Ms. Kuzner's here. Thank you.
Any thoughts on this matter?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ms. King. I feel like at the first of the meeting, normally we have the same people coming to the council meetings. Unless it's something that's coming up on the agenda that has an interest of someone else that may not know. Maybe it would be good for, if we do amend this, that the mayor, just at the start of public comment, just say, you got 3 minutes, and council will not be responding. So,
okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Kuznar. Oh, so hearing from that, I think what we have is probably well worded, and we just need to make sure that we're announcing better at the beginnings of meetings, and we will go from there. So I asked this to be put back on because it was tabled last time and it's been untabled and no action will be taken. Okay, next item, new business. We have a number of things. You should have A through E. Let's start with A. This is employee vacation hours deadline rollback, pages 24 through 25 in your packet. We'll ask Mr. Putnam to jump in here on this item. Unless Mr. Madden would like to take the reins there.
I think Mr. Putnam
Thank
be
you.
able to detail that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you again, Mr. Reynolds. As I think most of you know, our policy states that as of July 1 of each year, any employee with vacation hours over 240 hours, except for firefighters, and that is 213 hours for them. If you have anything over, if you're administrative, rec, PW, police, if you have over 240, say you have 250, July 1, you lose the 10 hours that you are over the 240. And if you're a firefighter, it's anything over 213. Certainly with the events that we've had unfold over the last 2 months, especially, and I want to give kudos to the folks in throughout the city, but certainly throughout Public Works, the Mauldin Fire Department, and the Mauldin Police Department. These folks have really stepped up, done tremendous service for our citizens, and they've not had the chance to take some of that vacation because they've had to be there. We're putting folks on the back of trash trucks that normally don't do that. They're in parks and rec, they're cutting grass usually, or they're in sewer or streets, but they're having to ride on the back of trash trucks because of we just don't have inmates. And of course, your police and fire, they have a tremendous sense of service, and they're there all the time. So what we are proposing is that we move that July 1 deadline maybe back to October 1 to give these folks time to take that time, that vacation time that they've earned before we roll it back to the 240, or in case of the firefighters, that 213.
Okay, Mr. Putnam, thank you. Ms. Abercrombie, is this something that is going to cause an accounting nightmare for you?
No, not really. It just may increase our liability on the government-wide statements a little bit for compensated absences, but that's the only thing. It's not going to be that difficult.
Okay. All right, Ms. Kuznar.
About how many hours and how many employees are there that have hours left over?
As far as number of employees, we're looking at about 30. And if you add up all the hours, it's somewhere around 900 and some odd hours. You've got some employees that go as high as having, I think my highest has 74 hours over, and the lowest one has somewhere around 8.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's we're not going to use all these hours up because there are historically always employees that just don't take the time. You know what I'm saying? And they lose it. They know they're going to, and for whatever reason, taking vacation is not their thing. But we will stand to lose a decent portion of that 900 hours, or use it a little bit later than we normally would.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ms. Kuznar. Do I have any more questions from the committee?
Chairman Reynolds, I would like to make the motion to go ahead and forward to council the Recommendation for the employee vacation hours deadline rollback to be extended from July 1st to October 1st.
Thank you,
Second.
Ms. King. I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Carries unanimous. Thank you.
Chairman Reynolds, could I say something?
Yes, Mr. Putnam.
I just want to thank the committee. I think this is it's a great gesture by the committee to push this forward, especially for what these employees have gone through over the last couple of months and what they've stepped up and done. And I just want to thank y'all as a committee for unanimously pushing this to council. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Putnam. I think trying to take care of the employees that take care of our city is important to this committee as well as other council members. And I know I'm not speaking for myself on that. Okay. Next item on our agenda is item B. This is a budget amendment. Ms. Abercrombie, will you take the reins on this?
I sure will.
Thank you.
Throughout the year, council has approved various expenditures, various revenues, and I have accumulated them and am now ready to present them to you for a full budget amendment. It covers several funds, general fund, capital fund, H&A, and sewer. And below you can see all the revenues and expenditures listed out, and a breakdown by fund. So basically, this is just all of the things that council has approved throughout the year, and presented to you in one place for a budget amendment with the ordinance adjusted for approval, so that we can be legal.
Well stated, Ms. Abercrombie. Thank you.
If there's any particular questions for any particular item, I'd be glad to address them if you have anything.
Will of the committee?
Mr. Reynolds, I'll make the motion to move to council for first reading the recommendation for the fiscal year 2020 budget amendment.
Thank you, Ms. King. I have a motion and a second recommending this budget amendment. Do I have any other discussion from council? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ms. Abercrombie, you're approved, at least out of committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next finance and policy item is 6C. This is a city phone system upgrade. Mr. Madden, your name's on here. Would you like to take the reins here?
Yes. Right now, the city's phone system is managed by VC3. And they initially signed a 60-month contract in 2016. That contract will expire in November of 2021. They're moving to a new system, and they want to move the city to that system. And with that move, they provided two options. The first option is to move the city over to the system and leave the current contract in place, which will expire in November 2021. If that option is chosen by the committee, a cost savings of about $100 per month. The second option would be to have a total new contract of 60 months. The city would receive new phones, replacement phones, and that would save about $300 per month. The recommendation from staff would be option one, let the contract expire in November of 2021, and then rebid that contract out. Staff did some initial research last year. There are vendors on state contract who offer considerably lower service rates than VC3. And so that is the reason why staff would recommend option 1.
Thank you, Mr. Madden. All the information is in your packet. Do we have any questions pertaining to this item? I'm of the opinion that technology changes so fast that it would be wise to run this contract out. If we go back with VC3, you're looking at another 6 months, 60 months, 5 years. Obviously, that's what VC3 would like to see, but I would be of the opinion that technology may change in just a year. So, any questions from committee? Hearing no questions, do I have any motion on this item?
Mr. Reynolds, I'll make the motion to forward to full council the request of staff to go with option 1 for the city phone system upgrade. For the phone system, for when the contract expires with VC3 in November of 21.
You're muted, Mr. Reynolds.
That was on purpose. I was doing a Miss King motion there. I have a motion to send to full council with a recommendation of the option to staffs. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on this item? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carries 3-0. Thank you, Mr. Madden. I'm scrolling through the VC3 contract. It's taking a minute. Hold on. Okay. Next item I have on our agenda. Mr. Madden, if you'll take this. This is item 6D, and in reference to the Freedom of Information Act policy.
Yes, Chairman Reynolds, members of the committee. In 2017, there were some changes made to the state FOIA law. In discussion with our legal counsel, it was requested that we update our policy to reflect those changes. So in your agenda packet is a resolution to approve the FOIA policy as presented, to make sure that we have a policy that is commensurate with state law as it relates to FOIA.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Madden. Do we have any questions pertaining to this?
Mr. Reynolds,
King.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Mr. Madden, if you could help me remember, is this something that we typically do on an annual basis? I mean, this isn't anything new, is it, with the resolution?
Not necessarily on an annual basis. The council approved the policy, I think, in 2017, that guides how we manage FOIA process. This is essentially updating that policy. This policy that's in the agenda pack is a little bit more in the weeds than the policy that we have in place, but it's to make sure that we're not missing anything as it relates to state law.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. King. Any other questions? Hearing none. What do I hear on this item?
I'd like to make a motion that the committee send this to full council for to consider a resolution adopting the related FOIA policy.
Thank you, Ms. Kuznar.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Discussion. Aye.
Well, I assumed not. I figured you had asked your question already. We'll be updating the committee rules policy on how to. Okay. All right, and the last item on our agenda is 6C, an ordinance waiving business license permit fees. Mr. Madden, would you like to take this one as well?
Yes, right now the city has is operating under an emergency ordinance that provisions. One of those provisions would be the extension of the due date for business license business license fees. And it's really not necessarily extension of the due date. It just waives the late fees associated with paying for your business license. That date is normally April 30th. That's been extended as far as waiving the late fees to May 23rd. This ordinance would allow council to do is to extend that date out even further if council chooses. In the most recent budget workshop, the discussion was held using a date of June 30th. But the council can change that date to a date that it sees fit.
Thank you, Mr. Madden, for being proactive and how we're dealing with our businesses through what is a tough time for them. Do we have any questions for Mr. Madden on this item?
Ms. Reynolds, not really a question. Well, I guess it could be a question and a comment. Holly, I know this will cause a delay on your final numbers. I also know you're a stickler and you don't really get final numbers out until the end of the summer anyway. So is this going to cause any hardship on your office if we were to go down this road?
More accruals, that's all.
I'm sorry?
More accruals, that's all.
Okay.
It's not going to be a big deal. As long as we can keep them, keep communication with David's department, find out exactly which ones deal with the prior year, shouldn't be a problem at all.
Perfect.
Thank you, Ms. King. Great question. I would think that this would fall in line with, it'd be consistent with how council was trying to work with businesses, again, through what is a difficult time for everybody. Do we have any other questions or motions to consider?
I'll make the motion to forward to council the amendment to the ordinance waiving business license permit fees from May 23rd and extending that date to June 30th, 2020.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Kuznar. Any discussion further? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carries 3-0 unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we are back to the top. That is all the new business I have on here. Let's open the floor for public comment one more time. Mr. Madden, if you see anybody waving or otherwise.
I do not at this time see anyone waving to be acknowledged for speaking.
Let me speak up. Mr. Reynolds. Chairman Reynolds. Hello. Hello. There.
Yes, Mr. Merritt.
Mayor Merritt.
All right, thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Just to be sure we get this on the record type thing, I want to refer you back to where your committee took up the public comment rules under unfinished business 5A. And it was alluded to that a document on page 17 was proposed amendment for public comment under the city council meetings. That document was never a proposed amendment, but was a proposal for full council to consider some additional guidelines that may help clarify what we would need to say during public comment sections during full council meetings. The second item along that same line in the same discussion, because knowing how this committee has worked diligently hard over the last few years to be consistent, on page 3 of your council agendas, or let me get the right title, Mauldin City Council Meeting Rules and Procedures as amended June 20th, 2005, page 3, where he talks about addressing the council in regular meetings under section 4. There's some guidelines there on public comment. Then if you go to the next page, addressing the council under public hearings, under section 4, you will notice the inconsistencies between a regular meeting and a public hearing as far as the direction on public comment. So I thought the committee and council might have liked an opportunity to be consistent in their guidelines with public comments. And that was the reason, along with the request from other council members, that we needed to clarify public comments, which I did hear some comments earlier, and I agreed with wholeheartedly, so that was good. I just want to be sure the record shows that was never intended to be a proposed amendment, but a talking point document. One last thing would be in standing committee rules that we have laid out there. Notice there are absolutely no guidelines on what public comment is allowed under our 2 public comment sections. And that is by design, because our standing committee rules and our standing committees are much more informal, and we leave it up totally to the chair of each committee to provide any guidelines or any monitoring of the comments and as they're intended by our citizens. So just wanted that on the record for us to consider maybe in the future kind of thing, but just wanted to clarify those points. So thank you, Mr. Reynolds. That's all I had.
Thank you, Mayor Merritt. I think we all look forward to the day that the public comment becomes more consistent as well, and it can actually be in the public and not in this virtual setting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other public comment? Okay. Hearing none, last item on our agenda, second to last item is committee concerns. Do I have anything from Ms. King or Ms. Kuznar?
Mr. Reynolds.
Ms. King.
Thank you. Again, not a concern, but there's just, I'd like to make a comment. Not really sure which committee is appropriate, but I'm going to do it here for policy purposes. But I read today that this week is the 51st annual Professional Municipal Clerks Week. I had to write it down so I wouldn't mess it up. So having said that, I would like to virtually recognize our city clerk, Ms. Cindy Miller, for her hard work and what she does to try to keep all of us organized and on coming back, especially now during COVID, and getting our packets printed up for us. So Cindy, as you're scribing this and listening to hopefully our audio that you can understand, you are being recognized during this week for the fine job you do. So thank you, Cindy. And thank you, Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Ms. King, for bringing that to our attention. I can honestly say I had no idea, so certainly would pass on my sentiments as well. We'll see how long.
I will add, it was on social media, so it must be true.
Yeah.
I will also add that it came from a neighboring city, so I'm trusting what they had to say.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how long the comments are about herself as she's typing this out. Let's see how verbatim she goes here. See if she talks about what a wonderful employee she is. But we appreciate her service as well. Ms. Kuznar,
a wonderful employee.
Any other committee concerns or comments?
You're muted again.
What do I hear on adjournment?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Have a motion to adjourn. Have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The Finance and Policy Committee meeting stands adjourned. The next committee meeting is Building and Codes. That is meeting number 5. Thank you, guys.
Okay, I see Dale Black and Taft Matney, Mr. Madden, Mr. Deerog. This gang's all here. Okay, it is Monday, May 4th, 2020. It is 8:19, and I called this meeting to order. Do we have any public comment before we begin?
Mr. Chairperson Kuznar, there's waving to be recognized. However, the All the audio is unmuted in case anybody wants to speak up. Members of the public.
All right, hearing no public comments, to reading and approval of the minutes. What do I have on the approval of the minutes from April 6, 2020?
Move for approval as submitted.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, minutes are approved as submitted. All approved, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So the ayes have it, 3-0. Okay, so now we go to reports or communications from the city officers. Mr. Durog, Mr. Madden, do you have anything?
I'll go ahead and just a few things. Here I have the budget that I sent each of the members. At the end of last week, you'll notice that the ideal remaining percent at the end of April was 17%, and we have 34% remaining in the budget, so we're in fantastic shape with our budget. And letting know, Ms. Kusnar, if you'd like me to touch on the other items I listed on department reports yet, or if you wanted to talk about anything else first.
Sorry, were you asking Mr. Madden?
Ms. Kuzniak, that I don't have any comments to add to what Mr. Deerhawk provided.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Durog, we have some department reports.
Yes, I just want to make the committee and the council members aware that we have begun advertising, that we are accepting applications from volunteers who are interested in serving on the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Planning Commission. We have started advertising this in anticipation that we will bring to committee next month the applicants for those boards and commissions, and in hope that we will forward that to council to take action on in June. Any questions about that?
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Durog?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay.
And then lastly, last month we had talked about our permitting and license software, and indicated that we had some interest in just exploring what other products are out there that we might consider. So we have begun doing that. We have demonstrated at least 10 different products now, maybe a couple more than that even. And there have certainly been some that have risen to the top. There's been one or two that we like very much. And the next step I would propose to do, in keeping in line with our procurement policy, is to go ahead and issue a request for proposals. I'm prepared. I have one ready to go. I'm prepared to go ahead and put that out as soon as tomorrow, in hopes that we might be able to wrap that up and come back to review those proposals next month in our committee.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. All right, we look forward to getting that from you. Okay, next we'll move on to unfinished business. Item number A is construction noise standards. That's on page 6 in your packet. Would you like to present?
Certainly. Thank you, Ms. Kuznar. At the last committee meeting, we discussed briefly just some alternative regulations that we could consider to our construction noise standards. Right now, the city allows construction noise to begin at 7 a.m. and it needs to end by 10 p.m. We looked at a few different options of just things other communities do last month. As we talked about that, it seemed like the only thing there was really any interest in from the committee, aside from maybe no change at all, was to consider a adopting something consistent with the City of Greenville standard, which prohibits construction noise beginning at 9 p.m. So in effect, we would be changing our ordinance to ask construction noise to stop at 9 p.m. instead of 10 p.m. Ms. Kuznar, you and I actually had the chance to talk with the president of the Home Builders Association for Greenville and just get his input and some feedback from him. I saw he was on this meeting earlier. He probably is still here, but the feedback we got from him was that he wasn't overly concerned with making that adjustment if we did from 10 to 9. I think mostly though, he wanted to make sure that we did have, especially in the summer, some later hours to allow for construction workers to work when it's a little cooler and as daylight hours are extended. So the 9 p.m. certainly still allows that. And at this time, I guess it kind of falls back to the committee if they want to consider making any change or no change. And I'll turn that back to you.
Thank you. Okay. Also in that conversation, Mr. Day asked that if there was an emergency, a pipe broke or something like this, that it was outside of that 9 p.m. that, they'd be allowed to fix that. Or if they're doing something inside like painting or something like that, and they're on a deadline, that maybe they could work after 9 because they won't be making any noise because they'll be inside. So does anyone have any questions?
Madam Chair, I would just say that I agree with Mr. Day that those are very important things to consider. Not all work makes noise outside of a house. So I think if we consider those items that he brought to the forefront, along with the 9 o'clock adjustment, I certainly would have no problem supporting this.
Okay.
Ms. Kuznar, too, let me add, if I may, the current ordinance does allow for emergency work to take place after hours. And certainly this ordinance only pertains to noise. So if there are construction activity that does not generate any noise, that would not be affected at all by this ordinance. Things like painting or even laying down mulch or whatever it might be.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what is the pleasure of council?
Ms. Kuznar.
Yes.
David, this does apply to commercial or businesses as well as residential, correct?
Correct.
I just want to make, maybe I overlooked it, but I didn't see anything in there that stated any different. So just want to make sure it's an overall coverage. Thank you, Ms. Kuznar.
Do I hear a motion to send this to council?
Before this to council.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Could I ask for clarification? Are we moving to council to adjust the time to 9 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, ayes have it, 3-0. All right, so the next item is small wireless facilities. Discussion on the ordinance. Mr. Girard.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kuznar. We've talked about this a time or two now. It's a very complicated issue. And in my report to you this month, I tried to give you more information about this issue. It was interesting. I sat and listened in on a City of Greenville City Council meeting last week. And conversation about it. They have regulations in place, and a little bit of concern on their part, even if their regulations will be undermined by other efforts going on, including a House bill that's currently at the state. So about the Municipal Association draft, or I should say Municipal Association model ordinance, the Mauldin draft ordinance that we've presented before, some comments that we received from AT&T, as well as some comments that we received from Verizon. I presented you information about the City of Greenville's ordinance, and I presented you information about the current Carolina House Bill 4262. And there's differences between all of them. I think at this point, what I'd just like to kind of get from the committee is what direction would you like to see this go? The Municipal Association, the draft ordinance that was presented to the city 2 months ago is very strict. The City of Greenville ordinance has a lot kind of strict too. The model ordinance from the South Carolina House bill is actually takes away a lot of the municipality's authority, and certainly we could make revisions in line with some of the comments we received from AT&T, Verizon. In fact, one of the thoughts that we could do there is just to schedule a workshop with some of the representatives and see if we can align our goals together. And that might be the approach recommended by staff at this time, but just wanted to see what direction the committee might have on this issue.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
My thought would be that a stakeholder workshop would probably be the direction that we would want to proceed at this time, because with various ordinances across the state being so varied, with the House bill being so, I would say more favorable to the wireless providers than the municipalities where they would be located. The wireless providers definitely play an important part, but I think that having everybody sit down, find out where that common ground is, and as David said, see where we can align our goals would be what I would recommend in terms of the best course of action at the present time.
Mr. Black?
Ms. Kuzner, as I mentioned, I think the lady from AT&T was speaking at one of our meetings, and I asked about the co-location of the towers, and she said it wasn't possible. But I mean, I would like to see something along those lines, because if you got AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, all your vendors just want to get into the 5G with a bunch of poles throughout Mauldin that we don't have now. But if we could locate everything on one pole, then I think that would save a lot of distraction and a lot of trouble. And I don't know where that's even possible now or not, but that's one of the things that I think we ought to explore. If we can use one utility pole and accommodate all the vendors and let them hash it out as to who pays what, then I think that would be something we ought to look into. But I'm like Mr. Manning, we need to have a meeting and get all the do's and don'ts from every vendor before we take any action to say, yeah, you can do this, and come find out it's not feasible or viable to any of the other vendors. But it's just my opinion on it. Thank you.
You're welcome. So if we had, say, 4 vendors on one pole, that would look, I'm not sure what that would look like. But if we had spaced out through the city and every one of them looked the exact same, I don't think that it would look as hideous as something with just a lot of stuff on it. I think a workshop would probably be a great idea. It would give us an opportunity to find out more about what the vendors are looking at, what the vendors can do. It will allow us to ask questions. So is that something that we need for staff to schedule? Do we want to direct staff to schedule a meeting for a workshop?
Yeah, I don't think that there's a specific action that needs to be taken by the committee other than providing that as a staff directive.
I think it'd be beneficial for the entire council. We had a workshop scheduled to hear everything from all the vendors as what can and cannot participate in. And the way technology changes, who's to say that 5G will change to 6G next week? So then they're going to say, well, what we got in place does not work today because that was last week. So I think council needs to hear everybody and see what is going to happen possibly in the future, because it's coming. It's not going to stop. It's going forward. It's my opinion.
That's great. Okay, so what's the pleasure of council on this?
Direct staff to set up and conduct a workshop with the various stakeholders.
Okay, David, are you?
I agree with that.
I'm good with that, and sorry, my video feed's off because I've lost some signal, and I just got you all back about a minute ago.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we'll just hold on to this until Mr. Durog and his staff can get together with the vendors and come up with a date for a workshop for council to attend.
Ms. Kuznar.
And
yes.
David, is there any pressure from any of the vendors for us to push forward on their agenda or their idea? Or is it just something that they see coming with the 5G and they want to go ahead and establish it and try to get ahead of the other vendor?
so I was actually just about to comment on that. We do have one application that the vendor seems to be very anxious to try to get approved. What I might suggest we could do, if Brandon's okay with this, is to take up that application individually by council, and this is for AT&T. I think they have an antenna and a pole they would like to install at a location on West Butler Road, and they're very anxious to get that done. So that could be one we just take up separately outside of the ordinance, and it would just be handled more along the lines of like a development agreement or a lease agreement type of thing.
Well, if we acted on that one, where's that going to put us with the rest of the vendors?
So I think that has kind of been a practice. I don't know if Mauldin's been into that practice very much, but I know other communities in the past when cell providers have wanted to install antenna on public property, that's been handled in more or less a lease agreement type of arrangement. Certainly we could consult with our own city attorney to see if that's something that we could consider here. But if that is an option, that might be something we could consider for AT&T and the urgency they're experiencing.
Yeah, I know that we're not like the coast, and along the coast where they have the high-rise hotels, motels, and condos, they have antennas on the roof. We're not blessed with that luxury where they can hide them up on the roof where they're out of sight, out of mind, so to speak. So.
Yep.
Durog, so how soon does AT&T want to put that pole up?
They've been asking about it frequently, so I'm sure they would have wanted to have it up yesterday if they could.
David, is that in our city limits?
It is.
Okay.
Any questions? Comments?
Only comment that I would have is we've already done this with Verizon, and I think with this being a time sensitive project for AT&T, And the precedent has already been set that we don't lose anything by considering this as a one-off project. It doesn't prevent us from continuing to work on setting a set of standards that we will work through from now on. But I don't have a problem considering this as a one-off.
Okay, so my other question, Mr. Durag, is are they going to put this on an existing pole, or are they going to erect a pole? And is it something that we would find desirable?
I believe I remember that they are wanting to erect a new pole. I'd have to go back and look at the details of that one again, but I think it's a new pole. I can't remember what it looked like. I just have to go back and look.
Okay, that's my other concern is what kind of poles are going to use. In what we have in our packet shows various poles. Some of them look really nice, and you can't really tell. I guess there's an antenna on top as much. It doesn't stick out as much as maybe a wooden pole. But there's you have different colors and designs, and maybe that's something too that committee would want to look at and see, or council as a whole maybe want to look at and see what we may want in our city. So is that something that AT&T would be willing to show us? This is the pole that we want to use, and this is where we're gonna erect it and what it's gonna look like, this type of thing, before they do it?
Yes, absolutely. And I think they probably have already submitted that. I just have to go back through their paperwork and look at it.
Okay. So is this something that we want to consider tonight to move to council outside of the workshop?
If you're asking me, you certainly could.
Okay, Mr. Matney or Mr. Black?
I don't have a problem moving the application forward to full council tonight because it's not necessarily that we're adding an item to the agenda. Based on the agenda that we have, it says small wireless facilities discussion, which is what we're discussing. So I think that we can certainly move that on for consideration. So if you would like for me to make the motion, I would move that we forward the AT&T application to full council for consideration.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
I think with the understanding that we okay this one individual application, that it could possibly change down the road as council sees fit to an overall package or an ordinance for the entire city for all the other vendors. I mean, this just does not give AT&T the sole proprietary, issue of they can do theirs and everybody else has to go by something else. So I have no problem. AT&T, I think, is the only one that's been up front. I haven't heard from Verizon or T-Mobile, any other vendors. So I think it's okay. And just like Mr. Matney said, to go ahead and do that for the AT&T, provided we get the information as what they want to erect.
Mr. Black, we've already done it for Verizon. That's one of the reasons why I didn't have a problem with the AT&T proposal, because we've already dealt with them through ordinance a few years ago.
We did that on when they did the fiber optic, best I can remember, when they put a little old box up on the top of a pole. Is, I don't know, like a 10 or 12 inch box that's on top of a pole for the fiber, but it was nothing to this magnitude of ever so many feet like all the rest of the vendors. Just, I think, targeting the main intersections and the main traffic areas when we did the thing for Verizon. I could be corrected.
Any more discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, ayes have it, 3-0. All right, so we move on to new business. There is no new business, so we open the floor back up for public comment.
Ms. Kuzniar, no one is waving to speak, but the microphone's unmuted in case somebody wants to speak.
Okay, any committee concerns? Hearing none. What do I hear? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
All right, this meeting is adjourned and it is 8:45 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and roll right into EPD. It is 8:45, Monday, May 4th, present. We have Ms. Kuzner, Mayor Merritt serving until the special election. I will be your chairman for the evening. Staff members present, we have our city administrator, Brandon Madden, community development director, Van Broad. First item on the agenda is public comment. Mr. Madden, could you unmute the mics and give people an opportunity if they would like to speak?
Yes, the mics are unmuted.
Anybody who would like to speak? All right, hearing none. Mr. Madden, if you would mute the mics again. And what do I have on reading and approval of minutes?
Motion to accept as submitted.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Ms. Kuznar was muted, but I did see her mouth. Second?
I'm sorry.
That's
Second.
okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Excuse me, is there a discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes are approved as submitted. Department reports. Start with you, Mr. Broad. You're muted, bud.
There we go. I'll start over. I'll start with our budget. Thank you very much. I was pleased to hear Mr. Deerhow report such a good budget number for his department. And I'm picking at him because we carried half of his budget for him. I'll go over my numbers. We're actually 21% over. Part of that is due to a salary line that we carried half of the year. They should have been moved down to BDS, but we carried that half of the year. As well, supplies for the facility at the cultural center were carried by the rec department until this past year. Those numbers never came over to our budget. Workers' comp is over 26%. I'm unaware of any workers' comp issues for our department. Insurance is over. Maintenance and repair, obviously the facility is built 1939, so it continues to need much needed repair work to the facility. And then the biggie, the community development UTC tax credit money that is funded through our account puts that item over at 3,986%. So when you pull those numbers together, it gives you a little clearer picture that our main budget is not actually over. It's just some of these mandatory expenditures that we're required to undertake. That's our budget report. If you guys have any questions for that, be happy to go over those. Our staff at the Cultural Center has been rescheduling some of our summer program in preparation for reopening. We are moving 3 of our beginning bands back to August. If possible, we may lose a few bands due to the inability to reschedule. As you can imagine, everybody is trying to reschedule some of these big bands through the summertime due to COVID-19. We're going to play the farmers market by ear, depending on what the city decides it wants to do and the state rules regarding social distancing. We may or may not be able to start at our normal time, but may have to push those times back as well. Tomorrow, our staff is meeting to discuss the reopening of the cultural center itself. Once the city decides to do that, we want to do at the cultural center as people come back to participate there. In development, we continue to see some extraordinarily great opportunity that continues to come our way as a city. We've been very proactive in continuing to reach out to different development partners so that when things move back forward and continue to move forward, we're not waiting for a contact and for that development to happen, but we've already been proactive in hopefully gaining a few projects. Just as an example, I met with a restaurant group Wednesday that's looking at a site here in Mauldin. So we continue to make those types of efforts in development. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Broad. Any questions for Mr. Broad? All right, hearing none, we'll keep moving. We don't have any unfinished business. Our first item under new business is the GCRA partnership renewal. Mr. Madden, is that going to be you or Mr. Broad?
Mr. Broad.
Thank you, Mr. Madden. As you probably are well aware, GCRA, which stands for Greenville County Redevelopment Authority, handles the HUD funds for the city of Mauldin. They come from the federal government in the form of a Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, funding source. Those funds are primarily used for housing, for redevelopment, workforce development housing, and are managed by GCRA. We have a 3-year contract with GCRA that is automatically renewed every 3 years, but council has the option or the right to opt out of that contract. If we were to opt out of that contract, it would probably make it a little bit more difficult for us to get CDBG funding. Historically, CDBG funding from an economic or a community standpoint is used for communities with an LMI, or a low to moderate income of 50% or better. Half of your community would need to be that. So we don't qualify under those since we're part of the Greenville entitlement zone. It's an easier and a more advantageous opportunity for us to partner with GCRA. They take a small management fee to handle our funds, but then they handle all the grant reporting, all the grant writing, workforce development housing, the old mill, the Old Mill Road Workforce Project was managed and funded by our HUD CDBG fund. So it would be our recommendation that we continue that 3-year contract and just continue to renew, but it's council's decision.
Thank you, Mr. Broad. With that said, does somebody want to offer a motion to reauthor or to forward this to full council to reauthorize the 3-year contract?
I'll make a motion to send this to full council for consideration to reauthorize the 3-year GCRA contract.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. 3-0. All right, Mr. Broad, I guess you're going to keep rolling.
Actually, Chairman Matney, you don't mind that I'll wait in on the next item.
Oh, you got it, boss.
I would ask that the committee allow this item to be a part of the executive session discussions with this to an economic development matter.
Understood. Well, with that being said, does somebody want to offer a motion to enter executive session for the consideration of economic development matters regarding Project Circle and City Center under Section 30-4-70A5?
So moved.
Motion, and is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. 3-0. We're going to enter into executive session. All council members and appropriate staff are invited. For those members of the general public who have joined us tonight, you can hang out here and we will be back shortly.
Question
See
for
y'all on
Mr.
the
Matt.
inside.
One question, Mr. Matt, on mechanics. Do I need to close this session totally out?
Yes.
No, you can just leave this session and go to the executive session.
The audio still is live. He needs to go ahead and close out.
Yes, that's correct.
Close the audio and close out, or just close down?
Yes.
Go ahead and get out of it and then go to the other meeting room. All right. We're coming out of executive session at 9:27 p.m. Who's going to report out?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mayor.
I'll be glad to. Coming out of executive session, no votes, no action were taken.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. No decisions were made, no votes were taken. Let's return back to item B, demolition services. Mr. Madden, are you with us?
Yeah.
Okay. Roll over that very quickly.
Okay, the city obtained bids for the demolition of city-owned property. And those bids were provided to staff, an evaluation team who reviewed those bids and made a recommendation to award that bid to complete the demolition services.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Madden. Appreciate that. So do we have a motion to forward to full council with the recommendation of approval, awarding the bid to complete demolition for certain buildings within the city center MSIP?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion from Mayor. Is there a second?
Second.
And is there any discussion after the second from Ms. Kuzner? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. That's 3-0. That moves on to full council. Now we're going to take item 6D, possible action on items discussed in executive session. Do we have a motion to forward to full council, funding a Bridges Road traffic study through the MSIP at a cost of $18,000?
So moved.
We have a motion from Ms. Kuzner. Do we have a second? Mr. Merritt is muted, but he did mouth second. And he's smiling because he's hearing me. Did ever say that?
Somebody kept muting me.
Is there additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. That moves on to full council at the upcoming meeting. That brings us to item 7, public comment. Mr. Madden, would you unmute the mics and let anybody who wants to give public comment their opportunity?
It is unmuted.
All right. If you would like to speak, please speak clearly.
I was wondering which are the buildings that we are planning to demolish and what's the reason behind it? In particular plan or anything?
This is just public comment right now. It's not interaction. We can certainly get into that later. But this is allowing us to move forward with specific buildings that would be contractual matters that we can't openly discuss yet because it hasn't been approved by council.
Okay. Thanks.
Additional public comment? Hearing none. Committee concerns? Hearing none. What do I hear on adjournment?
I make a motion to adjourn.
All right. We've got a motion. We have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. We stand adjourned and see everybody soon. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everybody.